Distinguished participants, dear rectors, vice rectors, EURAS member university representatives, dear speakers, colleagues and friends. On behalf of Eurasian Universities Union, EURAS, and EURI, Eurasia Higher Education Summit, we would like to welcome all of our participants from EURAS member and future member university representatives at EURAS E-Academy online training event in collaboration with Coursera. I greet all of our audience respectfully on behalf of EURAS and organization committee. We are hosting today Coursera experts at this EURAS E-Academy as they talk about how universities in the EMEA region are moving towards hybrid and blended learning, the skills they need to consider when they adapting their graduates to the new workplace and the fourth industrial revolution, and how Coursera is supporting higher education institutions in the path towards digital transformation. We are hosting today two esteemed guest speakers from Coursera, Mr. Damiano, the director, Coursera for Campus Project, and also Ms. Kerry Houchen, partnership director. You can ask your questions via the Q&A box of the Zoom. And the recording of this webinar will be shared on EURAS website later on. Firstly, I would like to invite our President, Associate Professor, Mustafa AYDIN, for his opening remarks. So I'm leaving the microphone to him. Thank you so much.
Evet, ben bütün arkadaşlarıma öncelikle sağlıklı bir gün diliyorum.
First of all, I'd like to wish everyone a very healthy day.
Avrasya Üniversiteler Birliği Başkanı olarak bütün katılımcılarımıza ve konuşmacılarımıza bu değerli katkılarından dolayı çok teşekkür ediyorum.
As the president of Eurasian Universities Union, I would like to thank everyone for being here with us today.
Biz Avrasya Üniversiteler Birliği olarak bu webinarlarımızı bir dizi halinde sürekli yapıyoruz ve üyelerimizle bir tecrübe paylaşım toplantıları yapıyoruz.
As Eurasian Universities Union, we've been doing these webinars periodically for quite some time now, and we are sharing our exchanging our experiences with our members during this time.
Buradaki temel amacımız bu yeni normale göre bütün arkadaşlarımızın tecrübe ve deneyimlerini üyelerimizle paylaşmak, sorunlarımıza ortak çözüm üretmek ve eğitim öğretimimizin daha kaliteli yürümesi için elimizden geldiğince çaba göstermek.
Our main purpose during these webinars are to share with one another our experiences, our problems, as well as the solutions that we can bring to these problems during what we call this new normal.
Burada da temel amacımız üyelerimizin bu süreçte yaşadıkları ve karşılaştıkları problemleri ne tür yöntemlerle çözdüklerini veya hangi yönlerde sorunları hala devam ettiğini hep birlikte ortaya koyarak birlikte çözüm üretmek.
What we want to achieve is to come together and bring out solutions to the problems that we are facing during this time and what we are going through and what we can come up with, what kind of solutions we can come up to these problems.
Bugünkü toplantımızda da yüksek öğretimde dijital dönüşüm başlığı altında yine bu konuda değerli konuşmacıların görüş ve önerilerini alacağız.
Today also we have very valuable speakers with us today. We're going to talk about the digital transformation in higher education.
Farklı platformlarda ben yeni normali dijitalleşme olarak değerlendiriyorum.
In different platforms, I call this new normal as the digitalization period.
Hangi sektörde olursa olsun, eğitim sektöründe, sağlıkta, parakende sektöründe, üretim sektöründe, her sektörde bu yeni normalde eğer kendi sektörünüzü, kendi çalışmalarınızı ne kadar etkin bir şekilde dijitalleştirebiliyor iseniz o alanda o kadar artık başarılı olabiliyorsunuz. Yeni sürece o kadar uyum sağlayabiliyorsunuz demektir.
It doesn't matter which sector you are in. It can be either education, health, production, retail. If you cannot adapt to this digitalization process, the more you get adapted to it, the more successful and the more effective that you're gonna be.
Hiç şüphesiz bu sektörlerin içerisinde dijitalleşmeye en çok ihtiyacı olan ve belki de bu süreçten yani pandemiden de önce bunu kendi içerisine uyarlayan eğitim sektörüydü.
Without any doubt, education sector is the one that's necessarily in need of this digitalization process, and the one that started this process before the pandemic.
Az önce saymış olduğum o bütün sektörlere öncülük yapacak olan da yine eğitim sektörü.
Education sector is also the leading sector that will lead to all the sectors that I just mentioned beforehand.
O anlamda bizler akademi olarak, özellikle yüksek öğretim kurumları olarak bütün bu sektörlere öncülük yapmak, yeni yöntemleri, yeni yaklaşımları diğer sektörlerle paylaşmak zorundayız.
As educators and education institutions, we have the obligation to lead the other sectors and show them the right way to pass to the digitalization process.
Burada iki önemli konunun altını çizmek istiyorum.
I'd like to mention two important topics at this time.
Elbette ki bu süreci aktif ve etkin kullanabilmemiz için kurumlarımızın, yani eğitim kurumlarımızın, yüksek öğretim kurumlarımızın dijital altyapılarının güçlü, verimli ve istenilen düzeyde olması lazım.
Of course, in order to achieve the best digitalization processes, our institutions has to have the best infrastructures in technical terms, in educational terms, and have the proper structure ready for these platforms.
Bu temel meselelerimizin, temel prensiplerimizden veya ihtiyaçlarımızdan birincisini teşkil ediyor.
This is the first and one of the main needs that we have for this process.
Ama bundan daha önemli yine bir konu vardır ki o da hem öğrencinin hem eğitimcinin eğitilmesidir. Teknolojiyi kullanabilmesini onlara öğretmektir. Yani eğitimcinin ve öğrencinin dijital platformları kullanma yetkisinde, yeteneğinde olmasıdır.
Of course, the other, maybe the more important part of this is the education of the teachers and the students in order to use these digital platforms in a very effective way.
Çünkü bu süreç biraz da insanların hazırlıksız olduğu bir dönemde önlerine geldi.
Because this has come to their hands in somewhat at a time that they were least expecting it.
Demek ki burada hem dijital altyapımızı istenilen düzeye getirir iken öğrencimizin ve öğretim üyelerimizin bu platformları nasıl kullanacağını, nasıl etkin ve yetkin olacağını da bunun eğitimini de yapmak zorundayız. Yani eğitimcinin de eğitimini hep beraber yapmak zorundayız.
So while we are bringing our digital infrastructures to the best equipped ways, in parallel we have to have the teachers and the students have the capabilities to use these digital platforms, which brings us to the teachers' trainings.
Asli olan öğrencinin sınıf ortamında kampüste gelmeden onu sanki kampüste imiş gibi, sınıf ortamında imiş gibi, laboratuvarda imiş gibi o dersi etkin ve aktif verebilmek bir üniversitenin asli görevi olmalıdır.
The main job of the universities are to give the classes, the laboratories in such a way that the students will feel as if they are in the classroom, as if they are in the campus taking the classes.
Ben değerli konuşmacıların görüşleri, onların düşünceleri çok daha önemli. Onun için çok daha fazla zamanınızı almak istemiyorum. Onları dinlemek istiyoruz.
I don't want to take too much of your time because what our valuable participants, speakers are going to share is very important. I want to listen to them.
Ancak son söz olarak bir konunun altını kalın puntalarla çizmek istiyorum.
But lastly, I just want to underline strongly one other point.
Bu sürecin çok kısa bir sürede sona ereceği veya normalleşeceğini lütfen düşünmeyelim.
Please do not assume that this time and this new normal is going to pass anytime soon.
Uzun bir süre daha pandemiyle birlikte yaşamak durumundayız.
We're going to have to live with the pandemic for a little bit long time.
Onun için gerek altyapımızın hazırlanması, gerek öğrenci ve öğretim üyelerimizin bu konuya hazırlık hale getirilmesi, önümüzde uzun bir süreci olduğunu düşünerek ona göre yatırım yapmamız lazım, ona göre strateji geliştirmemiz lazım.
So we have to invest and create strategies, thinking that this process and this pandemic is going to last a lot longer, and we have to prepare our infrastructures and our teachers, keeping this in mind.
Her şeyin başı sağlık.
Health is the main issue.
Eğer sağlıklı olursak, öğrencilerimize sağlıklı olmasını öğretirsek, bu süreci daha kolay ve daha rahatlıkla atlatabiliriz.
If we stay healthy, if we teach our students how to stay healthy, we will go through this much easier.
Sağlığınız yoksa, sahip olduklarınızın ve yaptıklarınızın hiçbir önemi yoktur.
Because if you don't have your health, whatever we are doing right now, it won't mean anything.
Onun için maskemizi takalım, sosyal mesafemizi muhafaza edelim ve hijyen kurallarına azami riayet edelim.
So we're gonna wear our mask, we're gonna keep our social distancing, we're gonna pay attention to hygiene, and we're gonna do what we do best.
Ve bunu etrafımızdakileri de yaptırtalım.
And we're gonna make sure everyone around us follows these rules as well.
Bu düşüncelerle ben bu toplantımızın faydalı, yararlı ve hepimizin oradan bir çıkarım yapacağı bir toplantı olmasını diliyorum. Hepinize saygılar sunuyorum ve sağlıklı günler diliyorum.
With these thoughts, I would like to wish everyone healthy, successful days, and hope this meeting will be very productive and fruitful for everyone participating. Thank you for being here with us today.
Peki, thank you very much.
Thank you, Associate Professor Mustafa AYDIN, President of EURAS and EURI, for your remarks on EURAS E-Academy online training program. So let me give information about our events briefly, then I will leave the microphone to our moderator, Ms. Ayşe Deniz Özkan. I'm glad to inform you that EURAS, in collaboration with several partners and members, is pleased to offer a series of free webinars on the future of higher education and international education during the fall term of this academic year. Online event calendar is already uploaded on EURAS website. We hope to see you also at our upcoming online events. Next webinar will be held on December 10. As you know, we started EURAS regional webinar series. We are also planning an international online conference at the end of this month on refugees issue. All the details will be shared with our members and also on our social media accounts. Also, as Coursera also has become our sponsor of EURI Summit, our annual conference, EURI 2021, will be held virtually during the first week of March. EURI Summit has become the third largest international education event, consists of an expo and conference program, and EURI conference program is designed to address current issues in internationalization of higher education and to cover key topics in higher education management. In many sessions of plenary talks, panels, seminars, roundtables, and workshops, you can improve your knowledge, exchange ideas, and be inspired. So you are invited to submit panel and presentation proposals to share your best practices as your university and also innovative approach during the COVID-19 or before. And if you want, you can also attend as a visitor in EURI Virtual Summit. Let me introduce today's EURAS E-Academy online event moderator, Ms. Ayşe Deniz Özkan. Ayşe Deniz Özkan is an international education professional of 15 years with previous experience as a lecturer. She has worked in many areas of international education, including Erasmus, short-term programs, and also marketing. She is also the part of EURI organization committee responsible for conference program. She also delivers professional development trainings and workshops for international office teams. She has experience also in international project management. As time and flow of the webinar permits, our moderator will try to ask your questions to our guest speakers at the end of their talks. So I would like to thank our moderator, Ms. Özkan, for moderating our event, and also our esteemed speakers for joining us today. And I would like to leave the microphone to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Pınar. Good afternoon, everyone. Pınar introduced me, so I'm not going to say anything, but again, I would like to underline the fact that we are already very excited and we've started preparing for the EURI Summit 2021. EURI 2020 was a huge success for us. It was our 5th year and we had a very rich conference program, and it was the last big international education conference before the pandemic hit us. Now we are preparing for a virtual summit in 2021, and we hope that you can join us, and we are ready to receive proposals from you. Please check our website. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you our expert speakers from Coursera today. I'll start with Mike. Mike Damiano leads the Coursera for Campus team across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. He has 20+ years of experience working on some of the world's largest e-learning initiatives. Mike has led many education technology projects across schools and the higher education sector. And at the core of many of the projects is education transformation through technology, often to provide new and innovative learning opportunities to underserved groups. Examples include launching the StudyWiz virtual learning environment in the UK, powering female education provision in Saudi Arabia through a national virtual classroom network, and delivering a hybrid learning platform with Laureate Education and Blackboard to over 1 million students across 25 countries. So we are very happy to have a seasoned expert, Mike, with us today. And our second speaker today is Kerry Houchen. Kerry is a Partnerships Director at Europe, Middle East, and Africa in Coursera. Kerry is an education professional with 20 years experience in Latin America, Europe, Asia, and most recently the UK. Kerry has spent a large part of her career building partnerships and supporting universities with digital transformation and job-relevant online education at scale. So welcome to Kerry as well. Now, we will sort of go on to keep this smooth with question and answers. And I want to first start with a general question. So Coursera, as one of the largest providers of online education in the world, of course, has a lot of individual users, has connections with higher education institutions, the best ones, the top ones in the world, and also you have partnerships with the business or the industry. So you have a lot of data at your fingertips. So I want to start with Kerry and ask, what trends do you see in this region, Europe, Middle East, and Africa in higher education from all the data that you have collected? Kerry, I want to pose that question to you.
Great, thank you very much, Aisha, and it's a pleasure to be here, and we're honoured to be having the opportunity to speak to everybody today, so thank you for that warm introduction. I think that's a really great opening question, and you're right, Coursera for Campus actually has been around for 1 year now, Coursera itself for 8 years. And as you say, we have a real depth of data. We have 75 million learners on the Coursera platform who have enrolled in courses from every corner of the world. And they span people who are in higher education, who are working professionals, who are unemployed people. So it spans a lot of different demographics from different industries. And actually, with that sort of volume of data, what we've been able to do is sort of bring that together. And for the last 2 years, we've produced what we call the Global Skills Index. And what that is it's sort of looking by different region. And also, we've even gone down to country level where we have significant amounts of data, and also looking at industry, at what skills are trending. So we're really interested in understanding what individuals are looking to learn. Their motivation generally is to fill a skills gap they have, to get a promotion, to help them get a job. And so what we're able to draw from that data is a list of skills that we consider to be emerging skills, trending skills for the future of work. So we kind of get an insight into the direction things are going as it's starting to build up. And I think the power of that is something that we provide this global skill index. We can share this with everybody, and we can share it after the meeting. But the power of that is that it will enable, in a university context, universities to look at their curricula and to think about how they can start to future-proof their curriculum as they're doing their reviews of that curriculum, or how they can augment it. So build on top of it to help bridge some of those skills gaps. We're all very aware. We've all read the reports. We all know there's massive deficit in the areas of data and computer science, but this will actually help narrow down into very specific areas that we should be thinking about, helping our students now prepare for jobs that will be around in coming to the fore in 5 years' time. But I would say in terms of trends that we're seeing specifically in higher ed, there are two big things that I would mention. I would say, of course, COVID has forced everybody to move to an online or blended or hybrid model. There was no choice. We just had to do that because universities closed. And again, we're going into a second round of seeing that closing down and education moving online. So I think at the start of the pandemic back in March, it was about emergency teaching. It's like, oh, wow, okay, how are we going to continue? How are we going to help students carry on their education, finish their degrees in some cases for those final year students? And I think at that moment, a lot of universities were not prepared because it wasn't the model that they were delivering. I mean, it was overnight, suddenly this happened. So I think there has been a lot of what we would call emergency teaching, recording lectures or just giving live lectures to kind of blank or screens of students, not much interaction. And I think that was fine in the beginning because we just needed to do something. But what we're seeing now, as we're going into the second wave, is actually students are becoming a little more demanding about the experience they're having online. And professors themselves are also struggling to blankly give a lecture to many faces on a screen with no interaction for hours on end every day is really, really tough for professors. So we're seeing that universities are now thinking this is going to be a reality, as the president pointed out. It's not going to go away quickly. And actually, we now need to move on from the emergency side of things and start to deliver a better learning experience online. And so we're talking to lots of universities about how to scaffold that online experience when the student is away from so in the asynchronous mode, how can it be scaffolded to help motivation, help them learn, and how can we make that time together with the professor in the room more communicative, where we can test whether learning has taken place, where the students can ask their questions, and it can just be a much more impactful time that we spend together online rather than this kind of talk and talk, as I maybe would call it. So I think that's the first thing we're seeing. And if I may move to the second thing, I think job relevant skills. So I think now there is becoming a pressure. We're going into an economic downturn everywhere, and people are losing their jobs. Parents maybe are tightening their belts on spending. And I think if you're going to spend on your education, you want to be very sure that that's going to lead you into employment at the end of it. And I think students now, more than when I was at university years ago, they're so much more focused on where they're going to go. I'm spending this time at university and I want to eventually end up in this type of a role. I want to go towards this. And that doesn't mean they shouldn't be studying classical subjects. Of course, broadening their minds, studying classical subjects still has very valuable place. That challenging their thinking, discussion is all great. But I think what we're seeing now at universities wanting to build on top to augment that education pathway that students are choosing with things that are going to bridge that gap and bolster employability outcomes. Also, that's one of the main aims of university, is to have high employability outcomes. But I think we're seeing more pressure from students and parents on having that as part of the promise of the university education. So I would say for me, they're the two big things. And I think that Global Skills Index can be really helpful if you're considering how to augment your curriculum as you go through curriculum review and planning more for the future.
Great. Thank you, Kerry. Now, I see Natalia has posted the Global Skills Index link in the chat box. So I invite everyone to copy that and take a look at that. And I sort of want to jump from what you said, Kerry, about job relevant skills and connected to that large data set you have in that report. And I want to ask Mike, how can universities read that report and what can they sort of get out of that report for their own purposes, and how can they sort of use that data to, you know, design their curriculum or teach those job relevant skills to their students. Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Isa. And thank you, Dr. Mustafa, for the introduction. And actually, I would like to start by thanking all of the panelists and everybody involved in education for all the incredible efforts that they have been making over the past 6, 7, 8, 9 months in order just to keep education alive and to keep learning alive. It has been an incredibly challenging time for the sector, but it's also the most important time for the sector. Everyone, governments, industry, parents, students are all looking to education to help us through this challenge with research, with teaching, with reskilling. So it's never been a more important time to be involved in the sector. And interestingly, I was touched by hearing Dr. Mustafa talk about how all sectors have been forced to digitize. I mean, in education alone, the online learning genie is out of the bottle now, and she isn't going back. So it's been a useful time in the acceleration of digitization. So I think the plans that universities had for the next 5, 10, 15 years to transform into a blended or online learning environment are happening over the next 5, 10, 15 months, perhaps. But to answer your question specifically, Coursera is in quite a unique position. Kerry talked about our 75 million learners. That is a huge number. And by the way, that was 40 million learners at the beginning of this year. So that in itself demonstrates the growth and the appetite for online learning, especially for job relevant skills. But within that, we also have about 2.5, maybe 2,800 companies and governments that have hired us over the last 4 years to help them retrain and reskill their workforce. And then we're working with the top universities around the world, about 165 of the top universities, and then about 40 major top leading employers like Google and AWS and IBM. And there's a virtuous cycle there. Our industry partners, the companies and the governments we work with, they tell us what skills are needed. We have the data to see what skills those 75 million learners want to learn. And using that data, we can go to our content providers and say, these are the next courses, this is the next material that the world is demanding. So that's we consider us to be, we're caretakers of that ecosystem. And so what that huge amount of data, and we were started by data scientists, so it's useful to have that grounding. That gives us the ability to launch that global skills index. And frankly, that's a global view. It's quite a high level view. We do dig down into about 60 individual countries, and we dig down into individual industries. So where universities are in areas that are delivering, graduates to go into the energy industries or data science industries or telecommunications, the data itself from that report can be useful in that regard. What I would say though is we use that as a grounding point to have discussions with university leadership about their own specific needs. And we also use that report as a launch pad, if you will, for other more specific reports for higher education or for specific industries. So the report at a high level can help universities build their business plan, if you will, on why it's important to focus on career-ready skills. And once that's recognized by university leadership, by senates, then we can actually work with them in a more bespoke way to help understand what are their specific aims, what are their specific skill sets, what are they looking to do in terms of their own local, national, and global stage. And by partnering with Coursera, using our data sciences and our skills transformation departments, we can develop custom projects, if you will, with the universities to ensure they can achieve their own aims.
Okay. Coursera for Campus is something you have launched recently, and I think this sort of goes to what you were saying about, you know, working in close partnerships with universities now, more so than ever. Why did you launch Coursera for Campus, and what exactly do you do under this title, Mike?
It is a really good question, and we sometimes forget. Kerry and I, who work, within the Coursera for Campus team, you know, many people know Coursera, and they know Coursera as one of the original MOOC platforms that was launched 8 years ago now, and it's known as something where any learner around the world can go and learn pretty much any skill or subject they want to learn, and that's still a very strong part of our business. About 4 years ago, we launched what we call our enterprise business, which is taking that package of high quality online learning content and integrating it into corporations, industries, and governments' own learning and development programs. So that's where I spoke to those 2,800 companies and governments that use it to integrate it to upskill their learners and their workforces. About a year and a half ago, our teams in India actually started taking that and working with universities across India. And we very quickly recognized there was a huge appetite for this, a huge appetite for universities to complement the skills and the subjects that they're teaching their students. And often we know universities are focused on academic, not necessarily vocational skills. So it was a really nice marriage of these high quality online career ready skills, marrying up with the more academic subjects to deliver better graduate outcomes. So we officially launched Coursera for Campus only in October last year. And across the region that I look after, EMEA, we really only launched it at the beginning of this year. So we were in a very fortunate position to be able to support universities across the globe when the pandemic hit. We already had a platform and the content and a delivery mechanism. So we went from, at the beginning of this year, about 30 universities around the world using Coursera for Campus, to by June of this year, through our coronavirus response initiative, we've had 10,000 programs launched across something like 3,000 degree granting institutions. And they're all using it in various different ways. But what it is, in fact, it's a collection of about 4,000 of these top quality career ready courses from the likes of Imperial College London, Yale, AWS, IBM, Google. So it's all those collection of courses right across all of the domains that a university would typically teach, but from world leaders in their subjects. So it's that content. It's also the platform itself. So universities that are using Coursera for Campus can use it to create their own content for their own students using the same authoring platform that all of those top universities are using to deliver it to their students. We also have, we spoke about labs earlier on. We have a technology within the platform to allow you to create, where you would normally have a computer lab that people would go to and do programming classes or classes in data visualization. We can do all of that online within the browser and have it be instructor-led. And then that combined with the ability to understand the skills mastery. So the platform allows university leadership, deans, faculty members to see the skills mastery of their students, or in fact their staff, because we talked about the need to upskill teachers and staff on digital skills. It gives the ability for leaders and academic leaders to be able to get a sense check on what skills development is required across their audience, and actually how their audience is doing in creating that. All of this is within a platform that combines the technology, the analytics and insights, and most importantly, that high quality career ready content.
Well, thank you. I want to turn to Kerry now and ask her to give us some specific sort of detailed examples of such partnerships. You know, some of the universities, especially in our region, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, some of these universities that you have partnered with under the Coursera for Campus, and you worked with them now for a while. So Kerry, can you tell us a little bit from these sort of actual partnerships of Coursera for Campus, what's going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got, I'm never ceased to be amazed how many different applications I see universities using with the content. And I think there are three main areas that we see universities engage with using Coursera. And I think the first one, which is the most simple, or not simple, but I guess a good first step for universities, is this blended model. So that, you know, universities don't need to change the curriculum. They don't, in many countries, it's highly regulated changes to the curriculum, and it takes time to have that review process, whether that's at government level or even through your own governance process at your own university. But if we look as a first step to a blended model, the Coursera content can be linked into the same learning outcomes that you are required to deliver as part of that program. So it can be kind of an instant way to support those very same learning outcomes without having to go through a very lengthy process, which you may want to do later on, but as a way to get started more quickly. And I can give an example. Covenant University, they are a Times Higher Education ranked university in Nigeria. They're ranked 101 for the young university rankings. They're 20 years old, and they decided that their curriculums, the Nigerian government mandate, you know, that what that must be. So they decided to take the first step to use Coursera to blend it into every single one of their programs, and they work on a 30% blended model. So that means that the students are studying content on Coursera in a scaffolded way when they're away from the classroom, as everybody is right now, but that process is pieced together with tests and quizzes within it, and then they come back to the forum where they're all together with their peers, whether it's online or in person, to then actually, you know, have that synchronous connection with the professor, where the professor brings value and knowledge, questions understanding, and the student can talk about parts they've not understood. So that's the first example that I would say, as a first step, it's a really good way to get started. Secondly, we see it as elective modules or for secondary subjects. So it may be, you know, you want to expand your curriculum, you want to offer more subject areas. Your students actually are asking you for them, but you can't either find a professor for the subject you want, or there isn't enough critical mass to make it scalable to offer that subject. So, for example, you might have a bachelor's in business administration, and you want to offer that with cybersecurity or AI, because leaders of the future will need conversant knowledge of these areas. But you don't have those professors. So some universities are using Coursera to expand that module, like that elective modules or secondary subjects, which they can offer in a 4-credit mode as part of a full degree program. So that's the second way to do things. And the third way, which kind of goes back to those job relevant skills and multidisciplinary skills. Now, this doesn't have to be in a credit for credit offer. I know that that's highly regulated. It can take time. But if you're thinking about where your curriculum is today, and you're looking at the future of work, whether, you know, the new COVID reality or the developments in AI, data science, that's going to affect, you know, every type of job, from retail up to CEO level leadership. We all need to be conversant in how this is changing the world that we live in. And so it's possible, and I've seen this in a number of universities, where they will select a number of multidisciplinary skills. That could be a soft skills program, a 21st century skills program for basic knowledge in emerging technologies, and they offer it alongside the curriculum as a, not for credit, but you can make it mandatory. And I've seen universities make it mandatory to ensure that
to graduate, you must complete this 80 hours of learning and emerging skills or entrepreneurship or whatever it is. So that's another example. And of course, there are many more, you know, for pre-sessionals, academic skills for university success, is a starting point as an education offering, when you're actually dealing with businesses yourself to provide training for alumni for lifelong learning. How can you strengthen your alumni network? How can you give the alumni who are in work and needing to learn these things something that's really valuable to them and help them maintain that bond and support existing students? For your staff who have professional development needs themselves, of course, and even faculty for their own research. So I think there are many, many ways, but predominantly we see the blended hybrid mode, the secondary elective mode, for credit or not for credit, and the multidisciplinary learning are the three main areas.
That was very useful to see how this sort of plays out, and especially what you mentioned at the end for the alumni. That was like really interesting and eye-opening for me, because I haven't thought about that. But now there's a talk of universities in the world where there's a lot of competition, and you have to really have strong connections to your alumni. And sometimes some universities say this is going to be part of the education and the fee structure to provide some courses for the alumni, maybe 5 years after graduation. So this is like really for the future, I think, but the near future. Very, very useful for us. So let me sort of turn to Mike here and ask, for the academic staff that you work together, in the Coursera for Campus program, how do they respond? What's their sort of initial response? How do they sort of work with you? And then, what's the sort of feedback that you get from the academic staff that uses Coursera for Campus?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because well, I've been working in education technology for 20 plus years. And if you don't win the hearts and minds of the academic staff, then you can kind of forget about it. And frankly, I've in various forms, I've spent the last 20 years working with teachers in primary schools and secondary schools and universities and vocational schools doing just that. And we know there's always been a resistance to change. There's been a resistance to online learning. And as I said earlier, the genie's now out of the bottle. And I was about to say many, but all academic staff have now been forced to experience what online learning can do. I'll talk about the general before I go into Coursera. So whilst it's been incredibly challenging for most, and we all have Zoom fatigue, let's be honest, but professors having to do that, we're trying to, as Kerry said earlier, trying to then gauge a virtual room of 300, 400 more students that they would typically do in a normal lecture. It's almost impossible. But there have been success stories, and there have been light bulb moments, and faculty and professors have seen that this stuff can work, and they're getting good feedback from their students. What I'd say we're hearing from the faculty that have adopted Coursera for Campus, one, it takes the pressure off them to repurpose their content that they already have. So if they were using PowerPoint slides or they don't, you can't really just put that online and have it be effective. It allows them to scaffold the learning for their students, to point their students to material that they can go and learn from world experts, and in many cases, leading world experts, where they might normally have told them to go and read a book from that world expert. They can go and say, go and take this course from that world expert. And then when we get together as a smaller group and we have those high touch engagements, I know that you've gone away and you've learned the material because I can see your skills mastery. So we can get deep into that questioning mode of education that professors are really, really good at. So I think that one thing of releasing some of the pressure off them to be the sole creators of the content. I think that's been fantastic feedback. The other piece is showing them and enabling them to become content creators for those who want to. So those that can use the same pedagogy models that our leading providers are using to create content that's available to our millions of learners, they can use the same platform and the same models to do that. And it's actually a very simple approach to use. So generally, the response from faculty has been incredible. That's demonstrated by the number of universities that have adopted it. Because again, I'll reiterate, we all know that if the faculty don't feel it's valuable for them or their students, they won't do it. So demonstrated by the numbers, they do feel it's valuable. What I would say, and what we sometimes forget, we sometimes forget to ask, well, what about the students? What's their feedback like? I mean, this generation, and unfortunately, probably the next year or two, as Dr. Mustafa intimated, the students at any level of education through these years are going to be facing a very, very challenging time. So it's important that we listen to them and understand what their feedback is. And we have an incredible, like any large technology company, we're very, very focused on user feedback. What are we hearing from the students? And we have a 5-star rating system. So at the end of every course, we ask the learners to rate that course. And we average about 4.8 out of 5. It's huge. The quality is incredible. And actually, if things drop below a certain point, then we go back to the content creators, we review it. If things continue to drop off, then we remove that. So we're very focused on quality content, but we can only do that by getting feedback from the learners and the faculty. And so far, the feedback has been astounding.
Okay. Kerry, what about the feedback of the university senior management, or if you're working closely, for example, with online learning centers at universities, like who do you sort of communicate with, within the universities that you work closely? How do you get their feedback? How do you feed the feedback back into your sort of offer? So how does that work? Again, give us some sort of specific examples, maybe.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think Coursera, it's not simply a platform that we'll hand over to a university and then say, oh yeah, off you go, here you are. We really do enter into partnerships with the universities that we work with. And we really, we'll have a team of people that will be dedicated to supporting this partnership throughout its lifetime. So we have one specific team called Customer Success Managers, and the Customer Success Manager will sit down in the very beginning before it launches to students, and we will together agree what success looks like. So we'll be really clear on what it is we're trying to achieve together. Is that to bridge skills gaps? Is that to offer a 30% blend? Is that to bring multidisciplinary learning to the university and to improve employability outcomes? And we'll look at all the different metrics that we want to track and measure to prove that the investment from both sides is working and is bringing the return that the university expected to see. And once we've kind of got a picture of how it's going to roll out, as Mike mentioned, there's such a depth of analytics within the platform. We can track right down to skills acquisition across 40 or more different skills, and we can look at that over time. We can compare it with other education institutions or other sectors, and we can bring a lot of rich data to the fore as learning is actually happening, way beyond just a simple completion metric. Yes, 100 students completed this course. No, we can go in much more granular. So that is an integral part of the relationship, and it's super important that we're able to kind of show that it's working, and what we set out to do we are achieving. And where we're not achieving, we can then bring in measures, to go, okay, so we've not quite got the engagement we wanted on these types of skills. How can we improve that? How can we bring in student ambassador programs, or how can we help staff to be more engaged with this, or understand it better? So there's lots of tactics that we can, you know, use to change the course of the trajectory, because we will monitor that really frequently. In other feedback, you know, I would actually say it's been really interesting throughout the Coursera for Corona Response program. I think many professors, or even leaders of universities, had set ideas of what they thought students wanted to learn or should be learning. And actually what we saw was incredible. We saw the most popular course across the 1.6 million learners that were part of the COVID response initiative in higher education. The most popular course that those students chose for themselves was the basics of Python programming. And most universities, you know, these students aren't computer science students. They're students from all disciplines that have realized that that's going to be important for them in the future. And they've self-selected that and done it. And I think that we got a lot of feedback on surprises from management of universities on actually what students were motivated to do themselves. And I think even student motivation has astounded many. We saw where the platform was open and the content wasn't selected for students, but they were able to self-select, that they actually really valued being able to go and learn what they thought was helpful to them, to gain those certificates. And I had some wonderful reports of how that had helped students gain internships and bolster their CVs. And I think that it just sort of, there was a lot of nice success stories that I think surprised management, where those experiments would never have taken place before COVID. It wouldn't have happened. So yeah, that's what I'd say about the feedback.
Thank you. I know Mike has to leave for another important meeting. Mike, is there any last word that you want to sort of say before you leave? What's next for Coursera for Campus? What are you up to, planning right now? What's in the works?
Wow, what's next? We probably, like, you know, every organization is, we're trying to adapt to the new normal. We're trying to do our own future gazing at how we can continue to add value. You know, our mission is transforming lives through learning. It's never been more important. And I personally, I'm very proud to be able to be part of an organization that can help with that. I think as far as our platform is concerned, we're working more to increase its efficiency for professors and for academic integrity. So we're integrating things like, you know, making it easier to integrate with Zoom, for proctoring, for plagiarism, basically a lot of things to ensure that the academic integrity that we already have is just improved. I think in terms of where we see the sector taking us, whilst for the past few months we've certainly been focused on universities because it's where we started, we've been drawn into many conversations at national levels around teacher training, that was mentioned earlier, but also the more vocational. So even school leavers going straight into employment. You know, school leaders need digital skills. School leaders need soft skills around communication and negotiation and other soft job skills. So I think whilst universities is still our core, I expect us to see more engagement and often at a national level with vocational education and even school leaver education. But in essence, we will be driven by the sector. We will be driven by universities and corporations and governments. And as long as we continue to add value, then we'll be able to continue to transform lives through learning.
Thank you, Mike. We'll say goodbye to you, but Kerry will stay. Thanks a lot for sharing your insights, your expertise with us, and hope to see you in other events as well. Kerry will stay with us, and you know, we'll take some questions. One question, Kerry, that sort of came up in our earlier discussions was, when universities work with Coursera and students are taking Coursera courses, you know, how do these credits are sort of recognized? Is there like some sort of accreditation, quality assurance, or credit recognition procedures that you've seen that you can give us examples from the universities that you work with already?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm asked that question very frequently. So Coursera itself, of course, you'll know the content comes from lots of different providers. Many of them are universities themselves. And of course, those universities have strong pedagogical principles, their own strong governance mechanisms as they've produced those courses to put them out to the public with their brand on. That's already gone through very rigorous process, and also been through the Coursera best practice on online delivery. So, you know, we do have confidence that the quality of the online content is of the highest standard. But when it comes to credit points, of course, every country operates different systems of credit. Many use the ECTS credit model, but it's not ubiquitous across the world. So Coursera itself is not accredited. We're not able to grant. We're not a credit granting institution. So what we do, of course, you will see the courses. We would help universities to understand what is in those courses, so that if you want to provide credit for the learning that takes place in these courses, you can validate that and decide how many credit points that should be. So we have, of course, spreadsheets that will include the number of learning hours this course takes on average, the learning outcomes of this course, the description, student feedback, and all of those types of things. And we can provide all of that information to the university for a top line overview. So when they're applying for it to be granted credit against their own degree programs, that we can support that process. If I give you an example of a partner in Germany, in fact, they are using Coursera content specifically for subject areas in TensorFlow, AI, machine learning, these really kind of forward-thinking subjects where it's difficult to find professors. And they are taking the Coursera course as the basis for the learning, the asynchronous learning piece. And their program runs for 3 months. It's a 3-month program, and for between 5 to 10 ECTS credits. And the way that they run that, it's sort of like a flipped classroom model. So the learner does the Coursera course, and then each and every week they come, although it's not physical anymore, they used to physically go for a 1.5 hour session with a professor or a subject matter expert to validate what they'd learned, to discuss if they had any questions, and to, you know, expand their knowledge around what had been happening in the course that week. And then they build it up to a project at the end. So the course, I'm thinking, is machine learning with TensorFlow, and at the end they have a project, which is a kind of hands-on project where they build something and then they present it back. And that's how they will then be awarded the 5 or 10 credits, the ECTS credits. So that it's just one example of how we've seen it built in for credit. And that institution, the program is accredited by the University of Kiel in Schleswig-Holstein in Germany.
Thank you. So the flipped classroom model is very interesting, but has been known and has been used before. So yeah. Coursera really fits nicely in that sort of paradigm. So it's nothing that, I don't know, revolutionary in a way, but it just works in a very practical way. I can see that happening. Now, some of the questions I'm looking at our question box. One of our attendees has raised the question of, the exams, with Coursera courses, how do you, and Mike mentioned this too, exam proctoring. How do you make sure that whoever is like enrolled is taking the exam, and so how does the evaluation process work, and how do you ensure that academic integrity?
Yeah, it's a really great question. Of course, each of the content producing partners, they would decide on what assessment methods they're going to build into their Coursera courses. And bear in mind, a Coursera course could be anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks long. But what we typically see is that when the content is produced, it's including lots of assessment points throughout the life of that course. So it's a continuous assessment model, whether it's checking understanding while you're watching a video, asks you a question, whether it's multiple choice quiz, whether you're actually producing a piece of written work that is then peer assessed, or whether there's an end project where if it's a coding course, at the end, you're potentially asked then to go into a coding environment and produce some code. But I think because it's continuous and maybe with this end point, it's not one single assessment where someone does it for you and then you pass. So we've taken that method. I mean, of course, if it's a high stakes exam, you know, if there's a lot at stake, if you complete this test, then it may be that you prefer to have an in-person exam or a proctored exam to really validate that learning. But I'm seeing, last time we spoke, I believe we ran a round table for vice chancellors in Turkey itself, and I know that Caroline Kerbin from MEF was there, and she mentioned that MEF itself had just pre-COVID moved to a more continuous assessment model and actually done away with formal exams in person altogether. And I think we may see a little bit more of that as we're responding to COVID.
I agree. I mean, initially that was like the biggest problem in the spring semester, right? Because the universities are so used to like a midterm and a final exam. The stakes are high, and then of course, how do you, make sure that those exams are not, plagiarized and that sort of thing. But with online learning becoming more prevalent, I think this continuous assessment is going to become the sort of the dominant paradigm in evaluation. And I think that's better for the students as well. It will take the pressure and the stress out of the, students' thinking, I think. So we don't need extra stress in these COVID times, do we?
Absolutely. And in the UK, actually, in secondary education, they've just announced that it will be all continual assessment. There will be no A-level GCSE exams in May next year, because we know that's not going to be possible. So governments are looking at it differently now, just to respond, as you say.
Yeah, accrediting bodies, university managements as well. Right. So another question is, and you somehow sort of provided a counter example to this, but from Bangladesh, from Daffodil University, Tashina is asking, will Coursera pose a threat of replacing the teacher? And I might add to that, will Coursera or online, courses, will they ever sort of replace totally, face-to-face education or universities as sort of these big, institutions of brick and mortar? What do you see in the, let's say, in the short term, and then maybe in the sort of medium to long term?
Yeah, I absolutely have no doubt that, online learning without any synchronous connection to other humans will never become the normal. I mean, I think universities as institutions of bringing of minds together, of sharing ideas, it's very challenging to do that in an asynchronous mode, and people crave the chance to talk about their ideas and discuss and learn from others. So I think we're all now we're housebound, most of us, and unable to mix with more than 6 people. We're really missing that element of connection with others to speak and share. So I can absolutely understand why professors may feel a little bit threatened by this kind of
turn to online, but I actually see this as a way that you can augment the pleasure of being a professor by using the tools. It's a tool, really, in a sense. It can help the students' experience while they're sat at home on their own be a bit more scaffolded for when they're learning alone. And then the time when you come together with your students can be so much more communicative and engaged, and really kind of revive what it is we're all missing about being together. So I think used in the right way, it can just provide power for us to make our jobs easier and better and more productive. So I don't at all see it as a threat, but it's about how to harness the power of that so that we can make the most of the tools.
I agree with someone who has taught social sciences before. I mean, if you can get rid of that, you know, fact sharing part, which is kind of the boring part, done earlier, you know, online, and then you can get together in the classroom, whether it's a virtual or a face-to-face physical classroom. Then you can just talk about those, you know, facts, how they apply to current, you know, global issues that we're facing, you know, concrete challenges in our societies, and really have sort of a critical conversation going on in the classroom, rather than sort of just lecturing and just giving basic historical facts and this or that. It just makes the teaching and learning experience better for both the teachers and the learners. I think I sort of completely agree with that. Another question in our question box is from the Vice Rector, Professor Mami of Setif II University in Algeria. And she says, while you're talking about sort of career-ready courses, but this is such an uncertain time, and this uncertainty may be related to the general sort of maybe technological changes, but these have been quickened now, everything made even more uncertain because of the pandemic. So how do we know that, you know, these courses or these skills that we refer to are really the ones for the future?
It's a good question.
It's a provocative question. It's a very nice provocative question.
It is. But it's funny because I was talking to a professor in Spain earlier in the week, and actually we were talking about the courses we'd done on Coursera recently, and courses around well-being and purposefulness and those types of things. We've seen it's actually one of the all-time greatest courses is the Science of Wellbeing, which was from the Professor Laurie Santos of Yale. And it really, now in this time of COVID, actually, I did this course at the beginning of the lockdown back in March, and it's been amazing how, you know, we all just need to bring our focus into more the day-to-day, rather than, if we think too much about the bigger picture, we can be frightened by the uncertainty of the future. And so I'm seeing a real surgence of interesting well-being courses for people to manage the challenges, to build resilience. There's a lot of courses we have on how to build resilience, purposefulness from Dr. Vic Strecker at the University of Michigan. So how to build purpose and meaning into your everyday, and not to think too big, but to take small steps and feel that you're progressing. So I think we have a lot of courses that I think we can right now really draw upon to help us through this period. But I think in terms of skills gaps, skills deficits, you know, automation, digitization, those things are rapidly upon us, and they are coming. And I think, you know, whatever is happening right now, we know that trend is there, and the, you know, digitization of businesses, the threat to our lots of roles and jobs, which is going to be compounded by the economic crisis, means that we do need to think about career-ready skills to be able to. It's going to be much more competitive now for the jobs that are available. So how can we show that we're more ready for these jobs? And so I think that still is highly, highly relevant, but you can couple that then with the things around well-being, resilience, to help us through this terrible time that we're all trying to cope with in our own individual ways.
Thank you. Another question just came in, Professor Mohammed Nizamuddin. He's asking if Coursera can start certification and diploma programs in the future.
So that's a great question, because actually we do have a number of professional certificates on or part of the Coursera for Campus platform. Mike mentioned Google earlier, so they have produced a professional certificate on Google Cloud Computing. So it's around 100 hours that you would take over a number of months, and at the end you would be professionally certified as Google Cloud certified. So there are around 35 professional certs currently available to Coursera for Campus partners. And diploma programs, yeah, I mean, I can see maybe in the future that we might start to look more at the bite-sized chunks. I mean, we have specializations, which are groups of maybe 5 courses that build up into specialization. Of course, we've already mentioned they don't carry credit, but I don't see why in the future maybe we might not think about that. But at the moment where we are, we have the guided projects, those short projects hands-on. We've got courses which are 4 to 6 weeks in length, specializations which are kind of 4 or 5 courses that group together to build up a deeper knowledge. And then we've got the professional certificates that again would be around 100 hours of learning for a professionally recognized certificate from Google, Amazon, IBM, those types of partners.
I think the answer also partly relies on the overall higher education sector and where it's going. If it's going more toward in the direction of micro-credentials.
Yeah, exactly.
Then I think Coursera, I mean, you'll move in one direction and the universities move toward your direction, and we can meet in the middle.
Yeah.
That's the trend for the future.
Yeah.
But as long as I think university programs are still 3 to 4 year undergraduate programs or 2-year associate degree programs, then I think there's quite a bit of differentiation between what universities offer and what you offer. But
absolutely.
Yeah, but the future is like open to, like I said, sudden changes may be brought on by events such as this pandemic.
Yeah, and I think universities themselves are seeing opportunities to broaden the types of learners they reach. And of course, many are already working in the education area. So where that is a smaller, more bite-sized pieces of learning. And I actually see that Coursera can form a part of that offer, because we don't bring the lecturers, we don't bring that live support. We bring the content, which is, the part that sometimes you find it difficult to get that piece to meet that demand. So absolutely, it will be in partnership with universities.
Okay. I think we took care of the questions in our box. I thought that we covered a lot of ground here today. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to Pınar to close this webinar today. Thank you again so much to Mike and you, Kerry. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Fabulous questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kerry and Mike, for joining us and for your contributions, sharing your experience with our members and especially invited guests who joined us today. And I would like to also thank on behalf of EURAS and EURE to Ms. Ayşe Deniz Özkan for moderating the session. Please be informed that this E-Academy program will be shared on our YouTube and our website. So you can follow us on our social media accounts. And you can also join us at the future activities. The closest regional webinar will be held on December 10th on Zoom again. And we will be hosting guest speakers from Canada, from the States, and from Latin America. And we will be sharing there also best practices. So we will be happy to see all international education sector members, as well as colleagues from all around the world. And this event has been organized in collaboration with Coursera. So we would like to thank Coursera Campus also for their sponsorship, for partnership. And we hope to see, of course, all participants at the EURE Virtual Summit that will be held in the first week of March. And we will be also would like to evaluate your presentation and also panel proposals together with our conference committee, which will be led by Ayşe Özkan. Also, she is here. She also helped us to organize this E-Academy today. And in September, we also organized the same, similar concept for Turkish universities. So we would love to continue our collaboration with Coursera for different kind of activities. We are open to new ideas, Kerry, whilst you are here. Although Mike has left, please also greetings to Mike. We would like to thank also to him for joining us, and Natalia for your support. And I would like to also thank to all our participants, our member universities, and take care, stay healthy. Bye-bye.